Tall Tales. The Nymph Symphony.
Chapters.
Chapter 18, Credence. The hall became a bright factory, an industrial fire pit of hard hat-wearing workers processing rock ore on long conveyor belts, while huge overhead machines loudly crunched and churned those dense piles of granite rock into a fine grayish waste powder. We slipped into this huge refinery, still mostly unnoticed, with miners mindlessly pulling levers and dragging mechanical equipment across the floor as they passed by us, simply too distracted by their labors to see us as outsiders. "That's enough. That's enough. No more," one angry miner shouted to another up above him, that frustrated man tinkering with the dials of a control panel situated beside the base of one of the first large pulley machines. "Just stop. Please, you're making it worse," he snapped bitterly, slapping both palms over his eyes and forehead, commanding the Nova's construction team using wrenches and spanners above to stop fiddling with the overheating steam pipes, which dropped down and rattled uncontrollably from a second-story scaffold system way above our heads where all the overhead cooling pipes met up. Those scrawny industrial nymphs appeared to have become masters of the mechanical arts, manually facilitating chains of linked buckets that scooped and carried coal ore from one workstation to another, crushing coal and granite under huge hammerhead pressure drills before an auxiliary scoop collected and then dropped it down a sluice that filtered out the rocky powder through thick grated steel sheets as it shifted out the waste soot and left only the sparkles of small glassy prisms behind, as they used poor worn-out old broomsticks to roll the treasures into nearby collection. Those men happening to be the only muscular members of their entire excavation site. Filled to the brim, we were intrigued to keep watching as we walked further into their mining enterprise, choosing to follow these hefty men as they wheeled the full bin into the next workstation, releasing it before the roaming supervisor. Each gemstone in that bin was blue, as each of them were picked up by this elderly supervisor and briefly examined before being placed into assorted piles. The supervisor held up each piece to the light, using one stray black glove as he inspected their transparency using a gold-rimmed glass monocle that rested tightly upon the man's old eye socket. He quickly examined each specimen, carefully looking for the best of the shiny blue diamonds. "Discard the rest," he ordered surprisingly, shaking his head, clearly displeased with the results from the batch, only choosing to keep 3 or 4 out of 30 and using his offhand to wave back over the laborers to throw the rest away. His valuable few were then handed to another to be passed through a second conveyor belt, along another pulley system, that must have head to the next room's polishing chamber, which sat behind a huge enclosed, thick gold vault room. "Imperial! Imperial!" a group of playful children then yelled towards him in excitement, running out carelessly onto the central mining pit just ahead of us, dodging the lava forges and climbing a few hills of sand as they came out from the doors of a track directly opposite to the one we had come in from, the young girl shouting it again and again from the middle of her juvenile pack as she ran with a hysterical euphoria towards the inspector we were approaching. These kids drawing attention from all around as she was accompanied by at least 24 ecstatic boys and girls also carrying fistfuls of rocks. "This one's flawless, we think," she stated to the supervisor. "Can you check for us, please?" she continued. That child then began slowly opening out her palm to show a growing crowd of adults what she and her friends had found, the look of glee across the children's young faces being enough to draw our own stare as we kept our distance but looked over from afar. Although that probably wasn't our best judgment, considering we could have used the distraction to pass through the bulk of the crowd undetected. "And if it's Imperial, would it be worth your life?" the supervisor asked rhetorically towards the children swarming around him. "No running on the factory floor," he scolded them patronizing, leaving them momentarily stunned as they bowed their heads in guilty shame. "It's dangerous, and you'll know better than that," he added, leaving the kids unsure of what to do next. "Well, come on then, give us a proper look," he said, ruffling the hair of one of the boys. Everyone peered down, holding their breath, mesmerized. The girl carefully handed over the bright glimmering blue stone, acting as if it were a delicate glass that could be dropped and shattered. "Well, it is clear enough," she said before bringing it closer to his eye on the light. "I think it might be of Imperial quality, kids," the supervisor then stated with a cheerful smirk, all the adults and parents smiling at the kids as they heard his verdict. So, what the real question is, what will you do with it? He asked curiously. The kids all smiled as they looked at each other and jumped about, patting and pushing each other with a modest attempt to control their excitement. I'm going to donate it, the girl then generously indicated. Well, if that be the case, young lady, then I think you and all your little helpers should go take it to Midas yourself, the supervisor courteously extended, setting the kids into a frenzy as they began vaulting towards the gold doors ahead. My friends and I looked at each other with unease at the mention of Midas, his name confirming our previous suspicions that this was where he lived. You are right. He is here, Arlo whispered to me as the small hope we'd had of this mission being risk-free began to fade. Amazingly, though, despite the sight of us in the tunnels, most miners here were so focused on their tasks they hadn't made a big deal of our arrival. Other than a stray one or two, who briefly stared at us with curiosity, we were moving through the mine towards a diamond dig site virtually undetected. If they were just pretending we didn't stand out, they were doing a very good job at it. Despite their obvious malnourishment, those cave nymphs were still just as passionate and fanatic about Midas's operation as he was. They were acting as if their work was saving the world. All of them were loyalists to Midas, offering their services because they wanted to, and not because they were being forced to. Everyone here seemed to not only be blindly following Midas in his quest to destroy the borderlands, but also faithfully believing in whatever twisted vision he'd shared with them about it. Although it's savage, and clearly unsafe, I must say this whole enterprise is ingenious, Anera said, voicing the thoughts she knew everyone was already thinking. Getting all these people to work together like this would take some serious levels of leadership, she continued, walking further through the denser areas of the mining crowd as we stepped down from the center flat factory floor and onto the sandy slopes of the side pits, where much of the physical labor was still being performed, our direction being towards the strongest level of artificial light being generated in this dome. I've never seen anything like this before, Arlo agreed. And this is not good for us. Taking a large crystal from an organization like this is going to be tricky at best, Akoni added. There is at least 100 miners here, who all know each other's names. What's more, if you look up, you can tell there's a whole connection of housing estates in the tunnels above us, he added, seeming to have a keen knowledge of the cavern's infrastructure. How do you know that? Anera asked him. He hesitated, almost as if deciding whether to explain his thoughts or not. Well, the pipes and the smell, he eventually said. It's not just brimstone, he elaborated. I think the cooling pipes are also wastewater pipes. They're being reemployed to create the steam that spins the turbines and powers all their systems. Haha, gross, the prince chuckled, amused by the prospect of it. Yeah, that's disgusting, Anera agreed, sickened by the thought of it. Yeah, but you have to admit the design is clever, Akoni said enthusiastically. They're using steam made by burning the wastewater in the forges to push and drive these machines, while effectively eliminating toxins and getting power out of it, always cooling the very machines being used in the process. How else would you cleanly and efficiently irrigate an underground place like this? Without a vast water supply, he rhetorically questioned. Well, I'd just dig a big hole, Arlo replied, blocking his mouth in disgust, as if the steam were a toxic fume we had been inhaling. They're already in a hole, Arlo, Anera quipped. So, are we breathing in? I began to ask, my curiosity trumping my repulsion toward the idea. No, Akoni said quickly, interrupting me. The steam is pure water vapor. Everything else gets burned away by the heat, he explained. As long as those pipes never break, it's actually a very clean method to use, he added, attempting to suppress Anera and Arlo's looks of disgust while he looked to me, amused by their reaction. Neither of us were exactly surprised that a prince and princess born within a castle of solid stone and gold could be repulsed by the prospect of irrigation. So, should we turn around then? I asked Anera and her brother with a small smile and snicker. It's as good a reason as any, the princess said back. No, well, maybe, only if it starts to rain, the prince joked, all of us trying to make light of the foreign environment we had found ourselves within. The prince being first to climb the first abandoned sandpit cut site, and follow a reinforced chrome metal girder ramp that led away from the crowd and over towards the trenches on the other side of the chamber. We didn't really know exactly where we needed to go, but nevertheless we felt safest so long as we kept moving further away from the main excavation area, actively choosing to head towards the much hotter and drier areas, which the overhead plumbing pipes seemed to disappear towards. Walking along a river of sticks, filled by rows of small spotted lava banks popping up and about every couple of yards or so, littering this entire activity site. Psst, hissed each lava spurt we passed, a sound similar to that of snakes ready to strike out, when in reality, it was just idle water drops plunking down from pipes overhead as steam was spilled by the instant evaporation of the water, just as Akoni had so perceptively described to us before. What he hadn't noticed or explained to us, however, was the use of cables carrying electrical current up and down the factory's walls and deep under our feet, insulated by all the waste deposits of crushed granite sand. It had been almost 2 decades since Midas was exiled from our land, but in this time, his mind and technology had only improved along with his maturing age, for now he was clearly capable of using his science for more than just illumination, but also to help replicate other NIMS abilities, such as conducting electricity, like his sun, via the use of steam generators and thick intertwined golden cables that led outwards from the magma trenches. He was also replicating King Helios's ability to direct and focus light, with the light present being generated from raw electrical energy coming from a crystal in a giant steel cage that sat in one of the unused dig sites to the left of us. The fuse box sparking at times as an operator controlled the adjacent conduit machine and used the concentrated light source to carve circuitry grooves into the insides of the refined blue crystals they seemed to be searching for. Methods of utilizing any and all excess power that was being delivered from the various steam mills that hung over the magma trenches like fans, while pipes of wastewater dripped into those trenches and created the wind that made them spin. It appeared that we had entered one of the dangerous areas mentioned before to the kids, as we were walking alongside an exposed metal tech yard of wiring and transistor boxes that filled many of the previous dig sites that had been recently repurposed to serve as the mind and battery source of their whole grand enterprise. For us, most of it came at us to a point of pure disbelief. The mechanical ingenuity and automation of self-moving clockwork parts were leagues beyond any other sources known, and because of it, we were all starting to consider the possibility of whether Midas's new technology was just as capable of mimicking Camilla's teleportation techniques and her gateway marble portal stones Midas built for her in the past, as it was on that thought that I realized what the bright glowing obelisk object we were naturally being drawn down towards must have been. We approached the diamond dig site indicated by the map, and the alluring diamond beacon in the furthest corner, nearing the closest zone of the proper industry walkway and their library-sized gold treasury vault up ahead. The dome made us feel as if we were inside Midas's mind, and although the speed and sound of things were quite intimidating to observe, no one could say that it wasn't sensational to watch. To both a novice like myself or even an expert engineer, like the man in glasses beside me, we assumed nothing could withstand the heat intensity of molten rock. But the diamonds that were being extracted from the ore down in his final dig site were being dipped into the stable lava ponds by chrome barrels in order to leach the unwanted rock soot from the glossy treasure inside. The lava leached out all of the valuable minerals from the ore by merely melting away anything that wasn't dense enough to survive the extreme heat treating agitation process. It was an impeccable reform of automated productivity. As there was no one operating this part of the dig site, it utilized complex harvesting clockwork robotics made up of cranks, cogs, and bolts. 4-legged metal-like prowler creatures programmed well enough to cut, lift, and carry the rocks without any intervention from the miners, who operated in the less hazardous dig site areas. These harvesting bots were searching and rummaging through the sands, using their sharpened mining claws and digging paws. They were glowing blue-brained automated creatures, with enough comprehensive intelligence and sense to be capable of collecting minerals and categorizing ore into varying buckets based on either smell or appearance, strutting as they walked with ore grasped between a big husky set of fanged teeth. Large metallic toys, so lifelike, they could have very well been confused as a type of living, breathing, and earthworm-fighting pet companions. The creatures ignored us as we dropped down the slopes and into the corner sand pit in which they dug their small mining holes, sniffing through the dirt, as tiny blue crystal brains and red crystal hearts seemed to flash in alternating function and thought. We moved cautiously forward, unsure of the creatures' speed and hostility as we looked to inspect them. Those creatures all operating around the bright aqua-glowing diamond that seemed to lure our attention from the start. Blue like the ocean, the crystal stone obelisk they worked around was enormous. A bigger, clearer, and crisper center diamond than we ever could have dreamed of bringing home. A brighter sunspire crystal than the one we had currently. "It's perfect," Akoni murmured to us, mesmerized by it as he consciously timed the harvesting machine's movements in order to pass him and get a closer look forwards. The diamond was entangled with wires, diverting power through the trenches, just like everything else. It was a giant transponder that seemed to dictate commands before the robots, oscillating between blue, red, and greens as it flashed with vigorous color. Not a great deal different than an oversized flickering mood lamp reflecting shades of color based on the movement of things around it. But these changing colors were internal, acting as some form of hive-mind remote controller that ticked these clockwork animals and vectored them programmable commands via some control panel that must have been on the rails of the second scaffold piping level still directly overhead above us. We started noticing the stares of those feral four-legged raptors as they began baring their razor-sharp teeth at us and growling, warning us with each step not to get any closer to the crystal. Up above the pit we were in, a league of loyal workers had begun to ring around and encamp us, their four-legged silver raptors barking, starting to draw more and more unwanted attention. "Guys," I said, looking upwards and unease, the first to notice the nymphs watching us from above. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" echoed a strong, confident voice from high above the roof railings prior to that man jumping down, sand dusting across the entire pit as he landed just a few steps in front of us, just before the pre-cut giant crystal. Gold springs laced into his boots and bracing his kneecaps as those coils compressed in order to cushion himself from what would have otherwise been an ankle-shattering heightened drop. Just as much of an intricate network of hydraulics across his muscular arms and fit upper torso as there were across his legs. A string of thin, gold wire frames wrapped around most of his body like a roll cage, and yet all but a leather quiver filled with a straw suspended across the large tool belt that completed his arsenal. Without a hood, cloak, or jacket to conceal his face, we all recognized Midas. The instant shock of seeing him there had jolted all but Akoni backwards. "It's the largest of its kind," Midas stated while we stood there waiting for the stunning silence to lapse. The former king walking towards us, unintimidated by any form of contestation. "Took us a while to find," he added, placing his gold-encrusted right hand just over the top of the giant stone, feeling how smooth its edges were only to move on and slowly enter into our immediate breathing space afterwards. The harvesting robots were all bowing their heads down. His entrance prohibited any of them from further yapping or movement. "Diamonds are almost indestructible by nature," he continued. "And believe me, I tried," he said with a smirk, attempting to make light of the heated situation as he advanced forward to greet us all. "It's not well known, but if you change the way the light bends inside them, they can be quite computational, no different than nerves inside a body," he said with a creepy and almost insidious kind of tone, making us all feel unsettled and uncomfortable as he made it clear that he wasn't going to be giving us the crystal without putting up a fight. He held up his bulky right and left forearms only to detach his metallic arm guards as a sign of peace, dropping the heavy armbands and some of its wire webbing onto the sandpit floor, revealing two crisp and clean muscular arms that hung calm by his side. He was acting so cocky, it was actually terrifying. Last time I saw him, it was but a glimpse in the dark, but he looked nothing like the man I saw in Ambervale. In all honesty, he looked good. In fact, he appeared so healthy and fit, I found it too absurd to consider him the same man that was supposed to be crazy, for he was still so strong, youthful, and confident, enough at least to remind us all just how out of our depth we really were to be facing off with him. He was hardly the desecrated and scarred-up war chieftain we'd seen under the shrouds back at Ambervale. In the light of the brightened excavation site, his rigged arms and thick three-branched calves made him look quite impervious to harm, even without the gold thorny vines of barbed wire he initially had protecting him. Muscles most likely credited to all the heavy hydraulics he must have been helping to lift every single day in this place since his reluctant exile. Akoni slapped out his flare gun with no time to spare, powering it up with one professional rotating spin as the fuel moved right from a loaded canister and into the barrel chamber instantaneously, while he aimed it towards his father, the purple spew of plasma radiating as his hands delivered enough charge to have the whole cartridge chamber ready for quick release. "We're taking this, father. No tricks. No one needs to get hurt," Akoni said, his expression angry and anxious. "And yet, you're the one holding a projectile," Midas replied to his son, appearing completely unfazed by the gun pointed at him. Smart enough to know what the device is. "Do what you have to, son." "Just leave, all right, before I have to," Akoni threatened, his hand slightly shaking as he kept the gun aimed at his father. A very dramatic scene for all involved, as even the spectators stood unsurely above, afraid of what our friend might do if provoked. "So, I see you've had a look at some of my old designs," Midas calmly responded, ignoring his son's warning. "I'm impressed, my son. I never could have got something like that to work." "Don't call me son," Akoni yelled back to him viciously and vindictively, a true darker and more emotional side of him I had never once seen before. "Okay," Midas agreed in tactical surrender, backing up slightly towards the crystal in order to give him more space. "You're right. I haven't earned that privilege yet." An uncomfortable quietness settled in the pit as we awkwardly watched this family reunion. "Xenon or radium plasma?" Midas asked curiously while he stared boldly down the barrel of his son's deadly flare gun. "Argon," Akoni answered, maintaining an angry frown as he said it. "But radon would burn hotter and brighter," Midas argued. "But radon won't disintegrate gold," Akoni retorted. "That hurts, son," he quipped, looking at his own roll cage armor only to realize it was useless. "I said don't call me son," Akoni shouted in a stern warning. "But you are my son, and killing me won't change that," he said with a tearful yet proud defiance. "Akoni, please. I mean you no ill will. I left you that very sword so that one day when you were old enough you could come find me," he continued, backing away from us and the crystal. "You have no idea how much I've missed you, how hard it was for me to leave without you," he said. "And as for you, Kaya," he then said, his eyes shifting to me and shocking everyone with the realization that he knew who I was. "Yes, I know exactly who and what you are," he said, reacting to our joint stare of genuine surprise. "You know, some might say that shadows are servants of the light, that they are the watchers who maintain the balance between the day and the night, and that's why they require a bit of both to exist. I really do hope you keep that in mind when this day is through," he then said to me, choosing to look and talk directly to me as I sat there. "Now, I'm willing to bet you have so many questions about your parents, questions others won't answer," he said, continuing to lower my concerns as he lured my curiosity and interest. "Don't let him fool you," Anera pleaded, fearing I might succumb to some form of trickery, even if the confidence of which he spoke was strong enough to set all shivering nerves solid into stone. He then held out his hand, an indication that I should walk over to him. "Come on. I know it's you. I'd recognize those amber eyes anywhere. The only real question to ask is why the hell you are on their side as opposed to mine." "Don't pretend you know her," Arlo responded on my behalf. "What do you know of my parents?" I asked, despite clearly sensing the others were afraid that my loyalty to them was waning, my dire curiosity for answers too compelling for me to even care if I was indeed scaring them. "Everything," he responded. "Kaya, Midas is a delusional and a manipulator. Don't trust him because he knows your name. There's many ways he could have worked that out," Arlo warned, moving slightly forward in an attempted stance that impeded my path further towards the former king. "Look at the state of his people. Look at the monsters he's created. How many of your own people have starved and suffered just for you to make these metal predators?" he asked of Midas, trying to break me from the former king's entrancing gaze. "All for what? So you can terrorize and weaken my parents' regime?" he said, the first to verbally speculate the gnolls being these metal skeleton creatures under rags of cloth. "I've done nothing of the sort. You have all been deceived," he stated, backing off again. "See, I'm not the great monster in the night," he said, staring towards me. "My brethren are skinny due to a lack of light, not a lack of food, but they all choose to remain here and help me build things so we can buy food for those who really need it," he witted, amused at his own smug sentiment. "You can't fool us," the prince maintained. "You're no body saint or savior. How many would be dead if our parents didn't stop you in time?" "Less than the amount that died because they did," Midas yelled immediately back to him, Ask them. Ask anyone," he screamed, pointing up towards his own cave nymphs as they stood in stare. "It breaks my heart to say this to my son, but all of you are blind fools, and the only monsters here are you," he said, his eyes lingering towards me once again, almost suggestive that I was the biggest monster in the group. My feelings were mixed, my conscience nearly twisted. I could only wonder how conflicted Akoni must have been feeling, his finger twitching and hovering over his pistol's trigger, an incendiary bolt of flame readily point blank from his father's chest plate. The moral dilemma we all indecisively felt towards the true face of evil and exactly what evil was supposed to look like. I'd always believed an enemy would have a hideous face and lack all grace, passion, and charm. But having looked into the eyes of a madman, it was becoming clear that no matter who you are, everyone believes they are the good guys of the story. I was only just starting to realize that perhaps evil was faceless, that good and bad were simply two different sides of the same coin, and only different depending on what side you were viewing it from. That in essence, everyone believed themselves to be the victim as a means of justifying their own misguided actions. "I already know you won't use that," Midas declared bravely to Akoni, breaking the brief silence as we stood there in heated standoff. The prince raising Midas's old reflective swords towards Midas's throat, being the first one to approach the former king. "He won't have to," he declared, despite the growls of metal beasts all resurfacing as they raised their heads and started snapping their knife-like teeth open and closed in a loud sign of aggression, each growling becoming a bark that jolted us as we tried to remain frozen still. "Funny thing is, I believe you," Midas then calmly remarked, staring towards the fiery glowing crystal sword he'd built, gently brushing it away from his neck. "Akoni's hands look clean enough. As for these girls, their eyes seem pure," he continued. "But not you," he told Arlo. "I reckon you're every bit your mother's son, aren't you?" A pause of silence had filled the room as he started to wander around. Safely protected, thanks to his miners all picking up weapons and his robots seated around us. "I can still shoot you," Akoni said, flicking up the gun barrel in another nervous tick, trying to validate his serious resolve. "Then do it," his father shouted. "At least that way I'll die trying, unlike the rest of you ignorant murderers." "Just shoot him, Akoni," Arlo ordered without a moment's hesitation. "I know he's your father, but his war ends right now if you do it," he coldly admitted while Anera and I shook our heads in disapproval. Anera stepped forward. "Midas, he doesn't want to hurt you, and you don't want us dead either. So let us just walk away then," she tried to persuade him, the voice of reason as she was no longer concerned about possession of the crystal, but rather over the safety of every one of us. "Please, just have a shred of decency, and think of what your son would have to live with if he had to shoot you," Anera pleaded. "I can't," he said. "You'll know nothing of what that would do," he forewarned. "You're just fools fighting a war you know nothing about," he stubbornly attempted to reason. "You're deranged, and that's all we need to know," Arlo announced. "Am I? Is that what they tell you?" he vented. "Look at you, intruders, thieves trying to steal from a harmless colony. I respected your laws and made it my very life's work trying to undo the damage I did when I built that infernal machine." He ranted, his voice bitter in hostility. "Milena has poisoned your minds, and for what?" he yelled. "No amount of light and wealth can purge the darkness seething in every one of your souls. You're being controlled. Don't you get that?" He furiously shouted. "Just lower your weapons and I can explain." "Don't trust him," the prince said to his best friend. Akoni was confused and looking to me for guidance, completely unsure of what he should do as he stared towards me. I wished I had an answer for him, but the truth was I had no idea. Midas's ramblings were so convincing, but the fact is delusional people do believe their own lies. And this certainly did still feel like a trap. And if both boys were to lower their weapons, we would be defenseless against the very smart metal machines that could rip us apart at a moment's notice. The fact was that we were all scared, and none of us really knew what to do to safely end this stalemate. "She turned my own son against me. Does not one of you get that?" Midas suddenly shouted, making us jump all over again. Pure fear had overtaken me long ago, but each time he yelled, he sent my heart rate soaring all over again. A fight was imminent, I knew it. I had been in enough of them lately to almost foresee them coming. I noticed all my protective shadows weakly lurking in the mist as they slowly moved towards me. "Akoni, don't let their family use you like this," Midas pleaded. "They managed to convince your mother. But if you just look at the facts, you will know I'm not the enemy here," he said. "I'll be the first of us to admit that I have a lot to be sorry for, a lot of wrongs I need to make right. But with the world falling into darkness, the fact is none of you have the courage to do anything about it," Midas claimed, unshaken by his son's wobbling trigger finger and making a very strange and ironic statement concerning the fate of the borderlands, considering he was the one leading us back into that famine and darkness. "Unfortunately for the rest of you, though, I do." He then waved upwards to an overhead supervisor before turning away from us and taking a step up into the slopes, just as the volcanic floor beneath us began to rumble and shake.